Hi there. This is my 49 Chevy Panel Truck. We've been pretty much most states in the country. It's got a 292 straight 6 in it, hooked up to a T5, Borg Warner T5. I built it out of junkyard parts, and it's been good to me. It's been about 10 years driving all over the country in it. About 8 of those driving every day in Brooklyn, New York, and dealing with them tough city streets. Today I'm going to go over converting the front end to disc brakes. I'm using a CPP kit that utilizes the original hub from the drum brakes and adapts everything over to a caliper and rotor system. Why? Better stopping power. I'm gonna get ready to turbocharge this straight 6 that's in it, and it's about time. Drum brakes are fun, but they get a little scary. So I don't think it's too difficult. We'll go through all the steps, and hopefully it helps anyone out there trying to do this to their truck. This is going to be applicable to any 47 to 53 Chevy trucks for this kit, but I'm sure there's other kits out there that work the same way. So we'll go over any little issues that we run into and how to deal with them.
Alright, first things first, getting these wheels off. So pop off your hubcap. Throw it on the ground and scratch it all up. It's a 3/4 inch impact socket. Okay, this is your brake drum. These have been on here for about 10 years, I believe. I probably replaced the shoes a couple times, but we don't even need them anymore because we're going to disc brakes. Already started taking the spindle nut cover off, but all you really have to do is just give it a couple of whacks, dislodge it, get that guy off. I like to set it up close by so that when I pull off the spindle nut, I have somewhere to put all this stuff without it gathering up grease. So just bend our cotter pin back a little bit. Get a little gentle tap. And if I can get a grab on the top side. Let's see here. Let's see, a little loop there. If I can get my needle nose in there, I like to grab it and chap the needles out. Drop it in my spindle nut cover. Loosen up that spindle nut. Should be tight. Just tight enough to take up the slack in the bearings. Okay, spindle nut. A little washer in here. Usually the easiest way to do this is just to pull the whole drum towards you just a hair, and then pop it back forward, and then you should get your bearing and your washer all in one piece, which again I'm keeping in my spindle nut cover for now, so it's not picking up any dirt off the ground. So let's pull this guy off, and there's our front brakes. These guys are in bad shape considering it's probably been a couple years since I've changed them. So what we're looking at right now is the backing plate, and my spindles are not looking that great, to be honest. There's a lot of pitting on there. I may look ultimately into replacing them, but for now we'll see how this goes. So we've got these 4 mounting nuts right here that are mounting the backing plate to the spindle. We're going to take all those guys off with an impact gun right now and take the whole assembly off as one piece. Before I do that, I'm going to disconnect my brake lines back here. So I've got one going here at the frame mount, and then another one right at the back of the wheel cylinder. Probably what I'm going to do is just take this guy off. It gets a little tricky.
especially with old fittings. So we're gonna go real gentle. You really want to use a good flared, I think in my case it's going to be 3/8 wrench. What that means is that there's going to be 5 sides to the wrench, so you're kind of, you can get over the line and get it from the side in like a box wrench, but you have a little more grip on that fitting because it's very soft and they strip out really easily. This was an East Coast car, so I drove through a lot of winters in it, and I can see there's a little bit of corrosion on those lines, so we'll see how it goes. If I run into trouble, a little heat and a little lubrication will always help. Okay, so we're going to see how these fittings, how much they want to behave or not. This is the flare wrench. Where is it? There it is. It's actually 7/16, but this will slide over the tube and get me really good contact on that nut there, so we can give ourselves our best chance at not stripping it. Let's see how this goes. Alright. Oh, that was actually pretty easy. Let's see. So right now I have the hose spinning, but my fitting here, it's hard to see, I'm sure, but it's actually not spinning on the tube like it should. So what I'm worried about is spinning that fitting too far and twisting the tube and kinking it. So I'm working it back and forth until it wants to move on its own. And it's starting to move. But I think I want to put a little WD-40 on there, and possibly some heat to break that connection that's frozen. Okay, so I got a brake line loose. I had to use a little heat to make sure that I can get this fitting to spin independently of the tube. Well, if it doesn't, like I said earlier, when you go to turn that off, you're going to be spinning the tube with it, and you'll spin it and break it. You've got a lot of things going on at these kind of brake line junctions. You've got your clip, which I've already pulled out, but this clip here is going to be holding your brake hose to this tab off the frame. Really, the brake line is the weakest link there, so if you don't have a good connection on this hose and this fitting, something's going to strip or break, especially if they're old lines, which they are going to be on an old 47 to 53 Chevy. So, like I said, a little heat and a little WD-40 helped break that loose before I really torqued on it, and everything came apart pretty cleanly. Okay. Alright, now we're taking off our mounting studs for the backing plate. So we've got 4 connections here. There's cotter pins on these lower bolts here. If you see a castle nut like that, there's going to be a cotter pin in there. If there's not, sometimes it's either rusted or broken in there and it can jam out. These came out pretty easily. I think they were put in later and probably smaller than they should have been. If you do run into problems, like I did earlier on the spindle nut, the good trick I like to do is just get a needle nose plier, get it in your hoop there, and you can whack that with something and it'll pull the whole thing out. Can't do it with one hand right now. Okay, we're putting our 3/4 wrench on the back side, castle nut on the rear, impact on the front. A lot of crud on there. We're all clear. I'm going to give a light tap on the back of these bolts here. See if I can get them clear.
We're going to pull the whole backing plate assembly. If we're lucky. All right. Let's see here. Number 3. One backing plate assembly with hose. Okay, so now we're set up. We've got everything stripped down to the spindle here. It's a good time to check the play on your kingpins. I had these, well, I replaced them, I guess about 2 or 3 years ago. Last time I did the shoes, and there's pretty good. There's not a lot of play in there. And we've also got our drum here, and what we're going to be doing is stealing this hub out of here, and I'll show you how to do that next. Okay, so first thing we're going to do is remove these studs, and after the studs are removed, that'll give us a little room to grind down the heads of these rivets so we can knock them out. And what that's going to do is free up the hub from our brake drum here. Look on the back side, you can see we're really trying to get this whole center section out, and that's going to become part of the rotors that we'll put on to complete the conversion. So, if you have a press, you could probably press them out. I don't have one here, so what I'm going to do is knock them out with this hammer. Alright, so we're removing the studs here. I started on this guy here, I got it out, but I put the nut on first to see if I could save the actual stud, but it's really not worth the effort. So I think if you just get yourself a good ball peen hammer and whack them out, it's fine. They're going to be sacrificial. The CPP kit comes with new studs, so you'll be good as far as the conversion goes. These are a good whack. I mean, this is an old assembly. Like I said, it was an East Coast car, so we got quite a bit of corrosion on there. This one's already on its way out. Bada bang. But it does you got to give it a real good whack to get it to go. If you had a press, you could do this. If you're running into problems, a little heat on the drum will open it up for you. Alright, we got all our studs out, so now we're just going to grind down these 3 rivet heads that hold the hub into the brake drum assembly. Okay, so I ground down my rivet heads. You can kind of see the silhouette there of the body of the rivet. So it's about a 3/8 hole. We're going to get a punch here, just set ourselves upright, centered in there, and should knock out pretty easily. So as you can see, this is our hub. What I wanted to do is get these rivets to come out of those sides, but when I started to whack on at it, basically separated itself from the drum, as you can see. So, not using that anymore. We want this guy, but I've got to finish knocking these rivets out. So what I'm going to do is grind these down again flush to the surface, and I might set up some kind of block underneath here, maybe a socket or something, to knock those guys out. In the instructions it says to drill these out. I don't like that idea, just because unless you have your drill perfectly centered, you're going to open up that opening a little more than you want to. So I am going to opt to knock them out, and then we'll clean this guy all up and start getting everything ready to assemble with the CPP parts and get our disc brake set up all together. Okay, so I got my rivet out. I ground these down flush again after separating it from the brake drum. Rivets are by nature a softer metal than the pieces that they're used to fasten together, and if you start hammering on it when it's proud of the piece, it's just going to deform and you'll have a hard time getting it out. So we're gonna do these other two. I'm actually using, these are the spacers from the original backing plate, and they're just the right height to kind of get under here and act as support on either side of what's left of the rivet, and it should knock out right there. We've got two left, and then we'll disassemble and clean this guy up. We got to pull the rear bearing out and the seal and see what kind of condition they're in. Find out whether we're saving them or not. I think we'll be okay. And then we'll start reassembling everything with the caliper assembly. Okay, so I've got my hub out. I cleaned up both sides of the flange here with a grinder and a wire cup brush to basically get off all the paper gasket that was on there and any rust and corrosion. I was trying to really get this little groove here good because our CPP parts are going to slide over this, and I don't want any interference between the fit there, throwing off our true. So the next thing I'm going to do is knock out my rear bearing, and if you can see in there, it's pretty dirty, but what I want to do is get, there's a landing here, it's side of a recess, it's just there. I know it's hard to see on this camera, but that's the sweet spot for knocking out the bearing. If you feel in there, you'll kind of see where it snaps back there. Okay, so I'm cleaning up my bearings. I'm really cleaning up the whole hub assembly that we pulled out. And I just want to say real quick, I'm not a big fan of buying a bunch of brake cleaners and solvents and carb cleaners. What I'm using is just old gasoline that came out of fuel tank that sat too long. Don't want to run it in a car, but I've got about 2 gallons over here that I just pour into an oil tank, and this is a bearing I just threw there. And it really doesn't take much. It does a really good job of dissolving old grease. I've got my front bearing here, all together that we saved. I'm just gonna go throw everything in there and literally just kind of swish it around in there, rolling the bearing with my fingers. You can see how quickly it starts to work. So it saves a lot of time, and I want to believe it's better for the environment. Not having to add more chemicals that already exist. So there we go. I'll get into this and start looking at these bearing surfaces to see if they're reusable. This front one looks a little worse than the rear, but I think my rear's in good shape. Alright, so here's my hub all cleaned up. Hit it with the wire wheel again, try to get everything cleaned up off of there. And here's my bearings, my parts that need to be cleaned. I can see these rollers are pretty rough. This is the front, which is a little worse. So that's a good idea to replace these, which I will at some point. Anyhow, if you want the bearing numbers for converting to the roller bearings, front one is that there, and there's rear. But everything's looking good. If I do replace these bearings, or when I do I should say, you can see in here there's those access points. If you can get a drift in there and tap that out, that'll knock your race out, and then you can put new ones in and grease everything up. So all that was some old gasoline. Does a good job of dissolving the majority of everything. And then I'll take a little bit of brake cleaner and just get any hard to reach spots and make sure that these things are nice and clean before putting them back together. I'll blow them out with some compressed air before they get re-greased. But we're ready to start putting the CPP components on. Okay, so here's a little diagram of sort of what we're going to do here. Got my hub assembly all prepped. The one last thing you have to do, I'll show you how this all goes together. So here's your rotor provided in the kit. This is going to go on here and line up with your stud holes. And these guys here, get a top plate. It's also going to get aligned. I did notice that these holes are really not perfectly centered, but I think we'll be okay. I'm going to try to get as close as we can. Anyway, the issue is that this hardware is going to go into here through our hub and then thread into the rotor on the back side. The problem is we're going to be going through the holes where we had knocked out the bushings. Here, the original hole is too small, so I drilled this one over to 3/8, and that'll give you the clearance you need. So once everything's lined up, put the top plate on, and I'm going to Loctite these and thread them in, and then you have your finished rotor ready to mount to the original spindle. So I'm going to finish drilling this, and then we'll get it all assembled. Alright, so we're going to drop our hub assembly onto the rotor, line everything up. We've got the hardware provided. We're going to put some red Loctite on there. And then we are going to torque it down. Be gentle at first. Okay, so I got my rotor assembly all together, and the next step is to get our wheel studs installed. So these are just going to be pressed in on the back here. I don't have a press here with me, so I'm going to tap them in and get them started, and I'll finish the installation by using a washer and lug nut to pull them through from this side, and we should be good. If I have to, everyone's a little different, but I think we can get away with this without heat. If I need it, I'll put a little heat on it, and that'll help it set itself. You could also maybe throw some Loctite or some green Loctite, which is like a sleeve retainer, to help them stick, but I think they should go in pretty easily. We'll see how it goes. So there's a couple installed there. They're pretty good. I noticed, I know I said earlier I was just gonna get them started and then get the nut to finish pulling them in, but it's a really tight fit and it really needed that extra whack to get it to seat right. So I'm gonna finish the rest of these with the hammer and a drift, but ideally a press and even some heat would be the way to go. Alright, so I've got all my wheel studs installed. Not really happy about this this top plate here. So we've got the rotor provided by the kit. That's my hub flange there, and then this top piece sort of sandwiches the whole thing together. But you can see the holes aren't really drilled on center for the countersink, and so my hardware's really not sitting flush, and it's almost at an angle, which I really don't like. So I'm probably going to pull it apart and open up the holes, try to get it to sit better. Yeah, it would not be good for this to come apart. I mean, with the wheel installed, you'll have the pressure of the lug nuts holding everything together anyway, but I think that's still not great. I bought this kit a few years ago. Maybe they've improved it since then, but Anyway, so next thing we're going to do is get this mounted on the spindle, and then we'll set up our caliper mount. Pretty easy. I noticed on these instructions it doesn't really clarify which side you're looking at here, and the caliper needs to be facing the front of the vehicle for it to work. So we'll get our bearings greased up and clean everything and put it all together. Okay, so here's our caliper mount. We're going to mount this right here directly to the spindle. The directions aren't clear, but if you see here, there's sort of that bend. You want that to go towards the inside of the vehicle and the caliper mount facing the front of the vehicle for it to work out. So what we're doing is just using the hardware provided with the kit. We'll get our steering linkage all hooked up here and get it all together. These have prevailing torque nuts, included. I'm going to put some red Loctite, throw these all together. There's also you have two 1/2-inch bolts that are going through the bottom. One's longer than the other. You can see this kit only has 3 mounting holes, so obviously the longer one goes towards the front, and the shorter one is going to end up here, just connecting our steering linkage to the spindle. So I'm going to install my rear bearing and seal before putting everything together. It's pretty simple, but if you don't have any experience packing bearings, all I really do is just stuff it up in here all in the back as much as you can. And the point of this all is to get this cage completely filled with bearing grease so that you have it sort of coming through the front here. So I'll pack it a little and then I'll roll it, make sure everything's coated, get myself plenty of grease, pack it into the back some more. Anything that squeezes out, just recollect and throw it back in there again. Roll it around some, get it repacked, roll it. Once you got it nice and packed, you can drop it right into the rear race there, and then we'll tap in our seal and be good to go. Okay, so that's my rear bearing all packed up. This rear seal just kind of steps on there. We'll just tap that around the perimeter to make sure it's seated, and then we're ready to install. Okay, so now we got our grease packed and bearing in and our new seal, and that's just going to slide right over the rotor. Next, we got to grease our front bearing. We're going to toss that right in here. We got our washer and spindle nut. The kit actually comes with the spindle nut, but I like the fit of the originals, so I put this on with a new cotter pin. Get that all sorted out, and then our dust cap goes on top of everything. Okay, so there's my outer wheel bearing greased up and packed. I'm using the original washer, even though the kit does come with some replacements, but they're a little thinner, and the original just seems to be better quality, and there's nothing wrong. It's in good shape. So we'll get that on there. Again, I've got the option of using the new castle nut in the kit or the original. I did the other side already, and the threads didn't really feel good on the replacement, so I'm going with the original. So we want to preload the bearing. All that means is just tighten this up so you get the play out. Still got some play there, so let's tighten that up a little more. Okay, that feels good. I'm just about lined up on a cotter pin mark there. I've got a new cotter pin included in the kit. Always put a new cotter pin in, and we'll just pull that guy over. And I'll pop my new dust cap on, also provided in the kit, and our rotor is mounted. Just got to put the caliper on. Okay, we're looking good here with our rotor all mounted. I know I didn't do it in the last video, but obviously tap in your dust cap until it's seated properly. You can see bearings are moving smooth. We got no play. Spindle nuts tightened down properly with the good load, preload on the bearing. Everything's bolted up back here and Loctited. You'll know, I had gone over it earlier, but this spacing on the mount has got to be sort of moving away. You can see this jog here comes here and then jogs out. It's real easy to mix these up, so if you're coming in, your calipers are not going to mount properly. So these are the calipers here, or a caliper. This is referred to as a D52 caliper. It's a pretty standard GM caliper. These are the pads here. Before you mount anything, you really want to clean off your rotor. These are pretty much brand new out of the box. Don't think I really touched them with my hands being too greasy, but that's just from one quick wipe. So you want to try to avoid contaminating the disc brakes and keeping everything clean. So these mount pretty easily. You can see this flange on this pad just going into the front of the caliper, and your other pad with the retaining clip here is going to go on your piston side and just snap right there into the piston. This is like an indicator tab. Once you wear down enough, this will start to rub on your rotor and make a horrible noise that tells you that it's time to change your pads. Okay, so this part's real easy. Got our two caliper pins. Get the brake pad slide on. Get your caliper fully loaded. Make sure this guy's set on its recess there. You're just going to slide her on right between the mounting points on the bracket. I don't know if you can see it, but there's a little pin, sort of a bushing inside this side of the caliper. I had to tap that over a little bit, so if you do get hung up, those are movable. So you just get your pins and slide them through. If you can get it lined up. There we go. There's the bottom. Top goes in the same way. Now, some people lubricate these, which isn't a bad idea. On this type of caliper, I'm hesitant to. It's an exposed surface, and while these do slide on here, I feel like if you put any kind of petroleum product or even silicone, it's just going to be a magnet for brake dust. That's going to eventually restrict your movement anyway. So I'm going to leave them clean, and maybe after a couple thousand miles
I'll feel differently about it. But we've got a 3/8 Allen drive here, and just going to tighten these up. You don't have to torque them down like crazy. Just get them to seat. Get them a little stuck. That's it. Very easy. Okay, so this is our brake hose provided in the kit. It's got a new banjo bolt and new washers and the retaining clip for the hose on the frame side. I'm just going to pop this little protective plug out here. So you're just mounting your banjo side to the back of the caliper. I've got one crush washer on the top there. Drop another on the other side. You make sure everything's clean. You don't want any weird particles or debris inside here before you put it together. I've already blown it out with compressed air. And I'm just going to go through the process of mocking this up for now, because these hoses that come with the kit are, the other end is for a smaller size brake line than what I've got installed, and I'm going to have to make some new brake lines anyway. I'm putting in a new system, probably hydro boost and firewall mounted booster instead of the under the floor that I've been using for the last 10 years or so. When you're tightening this up, you really don't want to go crazy on it. You're just trying to crush a little pressure to torque the copper washers so that they can crush enough to make a seal there. This side is going to your frame tab, and you're going to use this clip once it goes through just to retain it. And that's pretty much it. You're gonna, once you get both sides done, depending on what setup you have, obviously you'll have to brake to bleed the brakes. I think there's plenty of other videos out there to go over that process. Here we go, disc brakes on your 47 to 53 Chevy truck. One thing I'm disappointed about is that I'm not going to be able to run my original wheels. I'm making contact with the caliper here on the inside of my wheel, so I kind of had a feeling that was going to be the case. I don't know why that's not just stated obviously on the kit. Who knows? There is an alignment issue with those three holes there. I'm going to have to take that top plate off and open it up. Maybe there's discrepancies on different hubs over the years, but I think that probably just some bad quality manufacturing there. I do have 1/4 inch lines on the front of my system, so that was I had power brakes, but they were drums all the way around. So with whatever master cylinder upgrade you're going to be making, just know that these hoses are made for, I believe, 3/16. I'm not sure, but I think that's standard for front brake setups. And yeah, I'll do some more research and probably post up part numbers on some of this stuff if I can find it, because it would be nice to know what the serviceability of these. I'm pretty sure these are, like I said, the D52 calipers. Those rotors I think would be probably easy to find as well, and it'd be interesting to see what other upgrades you can make to other cars using these components. I'll also put up the Classic Performance Products part number on this. I've been sitting on this for probably about 3 or 4 years, so maybe it's an upgraded kit now. Hopefully this is drilled better. I do like their products, and they're pretty affordable, so it's nice for anyone working on a budget. Anyway, I hope you enjoyed the video. It's my first one, so be nice. I can barely stand here in the sound of my voice, so I hope it wasn't torture for anyone else. Alright, good luck on your projects.